Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing all of my all-time favourite young adult fantasy books. There's a couple of different subgenres of fantasy in here, but all of them are YA. I talk a lot about adult romantasy on this channel, but I do read a pretty good amount of young adult books as well. I actually went through a few years back where young adult was my favourite genre. It was just all the books that were coming out that I loved the most were young adult. And I'm still definitely a reader that reads across both. I read across both of those genres. And I think there's something so nostalgic and comforting for me in reading young adult, and it's because it's where I started. Like when I was reading at 14, 15, 16, these were the kind of books that I was reading then. So there's something really nice about continuing to read within that genre, even though I'm now closer to 30. This is not an exhaustive list. There's definitely some of my favourite YA books that you might be expecting to see in this video and you might not. I've tried to keep it to around 8 or 9 books. So there is inevitably some that I am missing, but I've tried to miss out some of the ones that I talk about all the time, or the ones that you guys might know that I love. So in this video, I'm going to be focusing on some that I haven't spoke about in quite a while, or that maybe I just haven't spoke about a lot at all. Before we dive in, make sure you've hit like on this video, it really helps me out. And most of the people watching these videos are not subscribed, so if that is you, go and hit subscribe. Come on, it's free. Without further ado, let's dive into the books. First up is a series that I wasn't expecting to love quite as much as I did, and it has very quickly, even though I've only read one book from the series, it's very quickly become one of my top YA reads of all time. That book is The Dagger and the Flame by Catherine Doyle. I feel really bad that I haven't read Twin Crowns that is also by this author and very popular. But there is something about The Dagger and the Flame which is much more my speed. I think if you're a fan of Throne of Glass style stories or things like the Lady of Darkness series, this will be the YA book for you. It has a really delicious enemies to lovers plotline, quite literally dagger to throat moments, various points. And it's different people holding different daggers to each other's throats. The two main characters I absolutely adored. And this was jam-packed with action. I really love the two main factions that we have in this. Are they literally called the Cloaks and the Daggers? They are, in fact, literally called the Cloaks and the Daggers. There's a bit of mystery and secrets, and whilst this definitely isn't in the urban fantasy space, there's something about this city that just feels so alive to me. Very much like Selena stalking through the streets of Ardalan. And this had everything that I think a fantastic YA book should have. I would definitely say I recommend this for slightly older YA readers, so maybe 16 plus. There's not necessarily explicit content in this, but within the romance there is definitely a little bit more tension and steam than some of the other books on this list. So just in case anybody's watching this who maybe has a family member that they're thinking of buying this for, I would definitely recommend 16 and up. The world building was immaculate on this one. These like rainy cobbled streets that they're walking down by lamplight, like I was just so visually depicted in my brain. And I was so surprised at this. Again, obviously I picked it up because I thought I was going to like it, or else I wouldn't have picked it up. But something about the mystery and the secrets that both of our main characters harbour, and like the tragedy that has befallen them both. There's this scene, I'm pretty sure they on a rooftop, somebody gets shoved off a rooftop. Just like, I couldn't put this down. Super fast paced, super action packed, so full of fantastic storytelling. I will say a lot of the books I'm about to recommend do fit within that fantasy romance space. If you're an adult fantasy romance reader and you've been thinking about dipping your toes into YA, this is a fantastic one. It doesn't feel like it's written too young at all. There's something comforting and slightly cheesy about YA fantasy that I just can't get enough of. Like, it always seems to be down to 16-year-old girls and their boyfriends to save the world, and I am here for it. The second book in this series, the series is called The City of Fantôme, by the way. The second book is out. I haven't read it yet. I think because I want to give this a reread, but I also think it's going to be a trilogy. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but I might see when book 3 is planning to come out. And this one was pretty fiery as well. Our main characters have lots of grit, lots of heart, lots of sass with each other. And the ending was explosive. Quite literally, I think. Definitely a recommendation I would give to everybody who loves YA fantasy romance, or who's maybe just looking for a strong fantasy romance without any explicit spice. This could be the one for you. Next up is quite possibly not only my favourite YA fantasy of all time, but also just one of my favourite fantasy duologies of all time. And you know what this is. This is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is another one I wasn't expecting to fall as in love with. This was my first ever Rebecca Ross book. I have since read... Wait, no, it wasn't. I actually had read the first book of A River Enchanted before I picked this up. This was maybe my first finished series that I read from Rebecca Ross. There is something about this world that I just want to live in. I don't know why I want to live in it, because it is a war-torn, very difficult place to exist. There are very subtle elements of magic. One of my favourite scenes in this book is actually where Iris is our main character Iris, she's going for some lunch, and the store will only show her like sandwiches and other lunch goods that she can afford with the money that she physically has on her person. I think this world was so fantastically crafted, so individual, and the whole story kind of focuses around ordinary humans living in a space that is definitely not built for ordinary humans doing extraordinary things and getting involved in the middle of a war between the gods. There was something like Rebecca Ross, I just think, has one of the most beautiful lyrical poetic writing styles, and even though I think Divine Rivals is the more accessible version of that, there's not a single fault I can find with this. Iris Winnow and Roman Cantankerous Kit have my entire heart and soul. This is a Rivals to Lovers, and this is the book I think introduced me to the Rivals to Lovers trope and made me such a big fan of it in the first place. I love the kind of almost World War II vibe of this with the brown paper parcels and the little leather like suitcases. Just visually, this one is perfect. The romance is a story of first love, it is sweet, it is tender, and all in all, the story is just beautiful and romantic but has so much in it. The world is immaculately built. The writing style, I've spoken about Rebecca Ross a lot before. I really love the way she writes. I find it super enjoyable, almost relaxing and therapeutic in a way. And I'm recommending book 1, Divine Rivals, but take this recommendation as the whole series. This is a finished duology as well, so if you are looking for something that is completed, this could be the one for you. And I read this at a time that all the other fantasy that I was reading was kind of bigger, dragon riding, world ending kind of vibes. And not that there's not dragons in this, and not that there's not world ending stakes at stake, but there was just something about this that really stood out in my mind. I think it's been 2 or 3 years since I first read this book. I actually read it before it released, and it stuck with me. It's a story that stays with me even now. Listening to myself talk about this, I want to reread it, and I'm going to watch the edit of this video back in a few weeks' time and then want to reread it. It is just such a fantastic book. Thank you to everyone who's ever recommended me Rebecca Ross, and thank you to every early review I saw of this book so that I knew to request a copy of it ASAP. There's also 2 author commendations on the back of this specific hardback from 2 of my favourite YA authors, so Shelby Maherin and Adeline Grace. I want to read you the one from Shelby Maherin because it absolutely sums up exactly how I feel about this and just like the way everything is depicted. Shelby says, rich and romantic, if stories had sense, this one would smell like a mug of black tea, the ink ribbons of a typewriter, and the addictive spice called enemies to lovers. I'm gonna have to put this book down because I'm risking sacking off my entire TBR to give this a reread. Speaking of Shelby Maherin, I couldn't make this video and not add Serpent and Dove to the list. I've been banging on about Serpent and Dove for years. I have been bullying my friends into reading Serpent and Dove. I have been bullying you lot into reading Serpent and Dove. If you're watching this video and you haven't read Serpent and Dove, take this as your final reminder. This is your final warning. This is where enemies to lovers, witch and witch hunters romantasy started in my brain. Where do I start with this series? I just think everyone who's a romantasy fan should have this on their roster. They should have it on their shelf. They should have it ready to whack out for a recommendation anytime anybody asks. I loved lots of things about this. I think where this really stands out is 2 aspects. Let's talk about 2 aspects. The first one being that this has this kind of fantasy version of France, I think probably in the 1800s, that I just ate up. The setting of this was delicious. Like, I could smell the pastries and the buns being cooked in the bakery in the morning as they're walking down the cobbled streets. Maybe that's the theme. Maybe everything here just has cobbled streets and that's where I'm sold in. Something about the way this was written was like just so lush. I also found myself like giggling and kicking my feet at these 2 finally holding hands. This follows the story of a witch and a witch hunter. So Lou is a witch and she's on the run from her mother, who is also a witch. And she's kind of camping out in this city. She's sleeping in the loft of a theatre. She's like stealing and doing little heisty jobs with her friends, also witches, just to try and get by and stay undercover. She does not want to be found. And then handsome, strapping Chasseur Reed shows up. The Chasseurs are kind of like a religious order of police officers in the story. They're also kind of like witch hunters. They look out for evil in the city. But they also deal with, I think, like your average like robbery or like fisticuffs in the pub, you know. And Reed actually stumbles across Lou when she's on one of her robberies that she's doing just to get by. These 2 find themselves very quickly thrust into an arranged marriage. Kind of a marriage of convenience, but it's not convenient for either of these 2. And everything is at stake because if Reed discovers what Lou is, he will have to end her life. This trilogy took me on a journey. It is finished and there is a spin-off as well, The Shadow Bride. No, it's not. This series is finished as well. It is a complete trilogy, and then there is a spin-off series also called what is it called? That one is just a duology. It's The Scarlet Veil and The Shadow Bride, and it follows characters in this world. I would recommend reading the original trilogy first. Great if you like your witch and your witch hunters. If you've read The Crimson Moth and you've not read Serpent and Dove, you're doing something wrong. Read them both. I think if you definitely love The Crimson Moth, this has a similar time setting. It's a similar age range that it's written for. I'd say this one gets a little grittier and there's a little bit more exposition and world building in this one, whereas Crimson Moth is a bit more focused on kind of like characters and relationships. But I think this one's underrated. I feel like the people who love this really, really love it, and then I struggle to find anybody else that's read it. Definitely one to add to your list, especially as it's finished. It's a slightly older series, like it's been out a couple of years now, but it is finished and it's one that you could just read through the whole thing. I recently forced my friend Millie to read this and she's also now obsessed. Whilst we're on the topic of witches, and whilst I've just mentioned it, of course, The Crimson Moth by Kristen Ciccarelli is on this list. This is another duology. I said earlier Divine Rivals, like there's two duologies in my brain that battle it out for my favourite fantasy duology. So the Divine Rivals or The Crimson Moth. In the YA space anyway, let's not start adding like One Dark Window into the mix because then there's a bunch of duologies that I would go to war for. The Crimson Moth, as I said, is another witch hunter. I definitely think this one is maybe like higher tension and the romance in this one is maybe more of a focal point than it is in Serpent and Dove, but only slightly. I think if you like one, you would like the other. They're completely different in their like styles of storytelling. I will say there is similarities in some of the magic, like in the way the magic is cast within this story and in Serpent and Dove, but they definitely feel like distinct enough, different enough. I don't think they're carbon copies. I think if you loved one, you wouldn't feel like the other one was exactly the same thing. They just have enough of the same ingredients that if you like one, I think you'll like the other. This is like a carb recipe. This is cake, Serpent and Dove is biscuits. If you like a cake, you probably like a biscuit. But we agree that the two things are entirely separate unless we talk about Jaffa cakes and then that just makes the conversation messy. These two idiots. Unlike Serpent and Dove, the witch and witch hunter relationship in this one is hilarious to me. They both kind of know exactly what the other one's capable of. He is hunting her, she knows he's hunting her, he thinks he's hunting her, and they're just going back and forth in like betraying and lying and convincing each other they are not the monster in the situation, whilst not being 100% sure of the other person's intentions and motives. I just wanted to bang their heads together at points in this, but it made for such a juicy slow burn romance. There is an element of the forbidden in both of these recommendations actually. This one feels a little bit more Regency-esque. It doesn't have that same kind of setting. It feels quite, you know, Bridgerton, but if there were witches running around. And this book is actually called Heartless Hunter in the US and maybe some other territories as well. So if you're looking at this going, the story seems really familiar, but I don't know the title. It's called The Crimson Moth in the UK and some places, and it's called Heartless Hunter elsewhere. This one I would definitely say is faster paced. It is just a duology, so it's just those two books, but the actual action in the book is faster paced. There's less focus on the world building. There's less focus necessarily on the politics. It's quite like action, 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 romance, bit more action. So if you do like something that is a faster pace that you're going to whiz through rather than something that you get to linger with, this one could be the one for you. I love this duology that much that I then went and bought Kristen Ciccarelli's backlog, and I haven't read her new book yet, which is originally actually with publishers Edgewood but is now A Dark Forgetting, but that is also on my list. So an author that I will definitely be picking up some more from. Next up, I have a YA fantasy standalone recommendation for you, and this one sits more in the sci-fi dystopian speculative fiction kind of world. You've probably heard me talk about this one before. It's Fable for the End of the World by Ava Reid. I could have very easily included A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid on this list as well, which is one of my favourite YA dark academia style fantasies. But everybody and their mum knows that I love that one. So I've decided to give you an alternative, and that is Fable for the End of the World. This is heartbreaking. This one is also a sapphic romance, and it's dystopian, kind of in a similar way to The Hunger Games or Divergent, but I feel like this definitely has a bit more of a political angle. All dystopian generally has a political angle. This one seems to be a little bit dialed up, I think the nature because it's Ava Reid. It feels like the political commentary in this one is dialed up even more so than a lot of other dystopian books, I think because of the fact it's Ava Reid and their writing is known for that. As I said, this one is a standalone, so if you're looking for a recommendation that's just one and done, I mean, you're gonna want a book two, because I certainly do. I need at least a bonus chapter at the end. This doesn't necessarily have the most satisfying ending, but I think that's okay. I think the nature of the book and the message, it's fine that there isn't necessarily like a nicely closed ending. It left me with a lot of questions. I have hope I do feel hopeful for these characters, but if Ava ever decides to release a book 2, I will be first in line. This one particularly as well, if you like a focus on more kind of ecological dystopian, kind of end of the world, floods, like changes to the ecological system and nature and the animals. If that is your kind of dystopian, this one could be really good for you. And I really like the contrast between our two main characters as well, one of them being like a very heartless hunter who's almost been fabricated to not have any emotion, and then somebody else who feels absolutely everything. Watching these two find each other and choose not to kill each other was a real journey. I also just thought the world that this was built in was a main character itself. Like, this was so different to any other dystopian even that I've ever read. It felt quite sci-fi, quite high tech, but also like there were areas of the world that were very low in technology. This kind of return of nature and this kind of like clash between Mother Nature and like this new dystopian technology was really interesting to explore. This one just like got my brain cogs going as well. Really, really good one if you want something that's going to make you think. And this has some really interesting things to say on our own world as well. My husband actually recently read this one and also really enjoyed it. He wasn't as heartbroken at the ending of me. I had maybe quite a pessimistic outlook on the ending and he thought it was quite positive. If you've never read dystopian before, or if you did, for example, read Hunger Games, Divergent, all of that kind of stuff, I think you'll love this one. If you're new to dystopian, I think it's a good one to start with. This is the US edition. The UK edition looks a little different. This is a UK edition, so just in case you're watching from the UK and you can't find this cover, there are a couple of variations of this book out there. Next up, I have another one for you that is kind of slightly dystopian and in that Hunger Games vein, and also a standalone, and this is The Grace Year by Kim Leggett. I haven't spoke about this for a long time. This is more dystopian in the style of The Handmaid's Tale dystopian than Fable for the End of the World, which felt more Hunger Gamesy. This one again has a lot to say, a lot of commentary about our own world, specifically around the role of women and the treatment of women in society. This was not what I was expecting going in. I actually only ever read this because it was like a book club pick. I am so glad that I did. This has very quickly become one of my favourites. I think it's got to have been 5 years since I first read this book. And I just think it's so underrated. Definitely not enough people are talking about this one. If you're looking for a standalone recommendation that is really going to pack a punch, it's this one. The world in this one is cold and brutal. I'm really going to struggle to talk about the themes and the plot within this one without spoiling the book, so please maybe just take this as a recommendation that you trust. Just go and pick up the book. I went into this not knowing much, and that is really how I would recommend you go into it as well. It's full of action and mystery and things not feeling quite right, and you as the reader are left trying to piece it together with the main character. It's a first person point of view, which I think really added a lot to this story as well. Like, we are experiencing this revelation of sorts and a revolution of sorts as the character is going through it themselves. It's part a coming of age story, it's part like adventure, it's wildly running through the woods and stumbling across dangers, it is resistance and revolution, and also it's just a really enjoyable, entertaining read. Trust me on this one, it's a standalone, you don't have to commit to a big series. Pick this up, don't go and research it, don't go and find out too much about it, go and experience it for yourself, dive into it. It is really, really fantastic. Next up, and let's talk about some dark academia YA fantasy titles. Obviously I said A Study of Drowning would usually be on this list, but you guys know I love that one. I tried to pick some you might not know that I love as much, but I definitely do, and the first one up is a pretty new release actually. This is Immortal Consequences by Ivy Marie. This one is set at an academy in the afterlife, and whilst I enjoyed the Atlas 6, this is what I wanted the Atlas 6 to be. That's nothing on Atlas 6, that was just like my own preferences and expectations going in. If you didn't enjoy the Atlas 6 but you've been wanting for some similar kind of academic competition, not everyone's going to make it, 6 individuals, this is this. I found the fantasy afterlife setting of this really intriguing, and the way that these students had the choice, if they win, you know, their gauntlet, they have the choice to pass on, which is quite mysterious, or stay as like the academy's magical elite. This was dark and shadowy and angsty, full of mystery and tension and suspense. I loved all 6 characters for completely different reasons. We have a bit of a rivals to lovers story, a bit of a friends to lovers, and I would do anything to protect you story. We have a story of friendship, but not actually, because one of them will absolutely throw their best friend under the bus to get ahead. So much drama in this, and the stakes are set so high. Lots of plot twists and turns. This was just so juicy, and I went into this knowing nothing. I was sat there one day in the mood for a bit of dark academia. It was actually before I was ready to jump into book 2 of A Study in Drowning. I was like, I just want to read something brand new before I do a reread. And I had this, and they sent it to me as a review copy, and I didn't know much about it. And I was like, you know what? Sounds interesting. I'm going to dive in. Absolutely no preamble. Just went straight into it. fell in love. It is definitely a book that I wish was getting more hype, and this is the first in a series, so we are going to see some more of these characters. And I think that was what was at the heart of this. Like, it was character. These characters were so addictive. Like, yeah, the world's cool, this school in the afterlife is cool, everything's cool, but you know what the coolest thing was? These characters and how they were like literally stumbling, tripping, stepping, falling all over one another. Just a fantastic one. And if you're scared of dark academia, because I was at one point, this is a great one to start with, particularly because it's got pretty heavy fantasy elements, being set in the afterlife and having all the magic floating around. If you are usually more comfortable with your fantasy and you want to try something that has got those more gothic, darker academic vibes, this one could be the one I would recommend to start with. She's super juicy, and then move on to A Study in Drowning afterwards. This was probably easily one of my most unexpected 5-star reads of last year. Next up is another dark academia title. This time it has vampires, and again it is another one that I need to see more hype about, please. It is Immortal Dark by Tigist Germer. Book 2 is now out for this one, and I sit here having not read book 2 because I am so scared of it. This is that dark academia fantasy. There's less fantasy elements in this than there is in Immortal Consequences in terms of the setting, but this one has vampires that are bound to different families, that have been bound to these families for generations. Every single character in this book is morally pitch black. No morally grey about it. They would all murder each other to get ahead. This is another one of the YA recommendations that I would recommend for kind of 16 plus. There's a bit of gore in this one, with it being a vampire style. It does have gothic elements alongside that kind of like dark atmospheric academia, but also like some of the things in the romance, there's some real steam, tension and heat in here. I need to see more people reading this one. It's generally one of my favourite dark academia titles, one of my favourite YA titles. I always recommend this as well for being a really great autumn to winter read. You could read this at any time of the year, but there is just something about like this historic university campus where it's set. The vampires, I get really into vampires in the autumn, I don't know what it is. And like some of the mystery and secrets floating around in this one that make it a weirdly cozy, gory read. I don't know. It's really action-packed, it's really fun. I had a great time with this one. I couldn't put this down. And I think this is the only vampire-y one on the list as well, so if you're a vampire girly, if you're a Twilight girly but you wish it was dark academia, go for this one instead. Next up is less of a singular book recommendation and more of like a YA author recommendation, and all of these books are standalones, and that is Margaret Rogerson. I think Margaret Rogerson feels like a YA version of Rachel Gillick. If you enjoyed One Dark Window, The Night and the Moth, like those kind of really lush, atmospheric, slightly weird stories, I think you will really, really like Margaret Rogerson. My favourite Margaret Rogerson book is Sorcery of Thorns. This was my book of the year when I first read this, and I found it so early on. I have reread this 2 or 3 times now. I absolutely adore it. They're just such easy reads, but they really leave you feeling like full of the giddies, okay? These are all fantasy stories with varying levels of kind of magic in them. Sorcery of Thorns was particularly my favourite. I really enjoyed the like library setting, these like magical books, the slightly shy and awkward romance between these two was super great to eat up. Enchantment of Raven sits a little bit more in that kind of like fae fantasy space, particularly in the weird like tricksy bargainy type of fae, but I did also really enjoy this one a lot, and this one is much shorter if you're looking for something quick to read. The only one I don't have in paperback is Vespertine, and I don't know why. Vespertine particularly was great if you are like a One Dark Window, The Night and the Moth kind of girly. Vespertine is probably more up your street, but my personal favourite was Sorcery of Thorns. I just think they're so beautifully written, the stories are so expertly crafted. Couldn't put these down. They're really well contained. There is a little spin-off to Sorcery of Thorns called Mysteries of Thorn Manor, which focuses a little bit more on the romance in the aftermath of this story, but just so good. I loved every moment of these. They are slightly comfy and cozy to me as well now. They just feel really nostalgic. I'd recommend these probably for 13 and 14 up. Whilst there's romance in here, there's not any kind of big focus on it. Definitely more focus on finding one's inner strength and the fantasy world and the magic systems and kind of exploring all of that fun stuff. And as I said, like really unique, slightly odd, slightly weird, slightly wacky, something a little bit wild about all of them. Like, I really enjoy these. I think these are fantastic. You could pick up all of them if you enjoy the writing style. If you just want to pick up one, you could just pick up one. And all the stories, actually all 3 of them, including Vespertine, which I don't have, packed with a little bit of darkness, a little bit of suspense, a little bit of mystery, a little bit of danger. Everything that I think you need to get like a good story going. These are just like, the story is expertly told. I think you'll have a good time with these ones. And the last book on this list is going to be the Belladonna series by Adeline Grace. I think this is probably the one on the list that most of you have read if you're watching this. Belladonna is a delicious, again, almost Regency era, dark, gothic, lush, atmospheric fantasy romance, suitable again for that kind of like 14 to 16 plus audience. This one is a fantasy murder mystery, which I don't read a lot of, but when I do, it has to be like this because this is so well done. I love the portrayal of death within this book. I love our weird, awkward female main character. I love the creepy, creaky, gothic, mannery kind of setting. So much atmosphere, so much just like juicy, gothic, delicious tension. I really enjoyed the side characters as well. Like this does look at romantic love, but it also looks at familial love, and that was something that I really enjoyed in this story. And again, the setting, I can almost hear like the horse and carriage as they're going to the tea room, you know? I can almost hear like the rustle in the like plants in the garden as she's wandering around. There's just something about this. It was atmosphere. It was just pure atmosphere. As I was reading this, I was getting chills. Another one that is perfect for the autumn and winter time, but you could read at any point. If you are looking for something that feels a little off, feels a little weird, is a little gothic, is a little dark, got a bit of a murder mystery to go. If you're newer to fantasy, actually, if you've not done a fantasy, you've read some other books and you're not sure whether fantasy is for you, this is what I would describe like a light fantasy. There are elements of fantasy within this, but actually the setting is more historical fantasy in type. So there's lots of different ways I can see this being a bit of a route into fantasy. If you found maybe, for example, Sorcery of Thorns a bit too high fantasy, like too many new things, and you want to give something a bit softer a go, this one is definitely more of a historical element. And this one, the romance plays a pretty big part in it as well. This is definitely one on the list alongside like Immortal Dark, where the romance is a really big subplot. So whilst it's not the main plot, it does play a really big part in the story. There is potentially multiple love interest, there is some danger, there is some delicious thread, there is some ghostly apparitions and slightly spooky things afoot. And this is now a finished trilogy as well, and there's also like a spin-off Christmas novella collection as well if you enjoyed this that much. And also, I think just as an aside, this has the most beautiful covers of this whole list. That is what I hope was a pretty quick tour of some of my favourite YA fantasy books. Hopefully I ticked up a couple of different genres here. There's some that are more like urban fantasy, some that are more like historical, some that are more like sci-fi. If you've never given YA fantasy a go, if you started reading as an adult and you're too worried to like fray into it, you think it's going to be written too young, or you don't think it's going to be for you, give one of these a go. Give one of them a go, and then at least you know if it's not for you. I honestly find such joy in reading YA. I find that the stories are often quicker paced. They're often easier for me to read, particularly in terms of like the world building. Like it is done well, but it's not done to a point where I feel like I'm like, oh, okay, and then this is the that and that, I've got it. Do you know what I mean? Like I find these easier to slip into, particularly if I'm in a slump. And I just think they harbour such fantastic stories and such incredible character-driven stories. Don't discount a book because it's YA, I think is what I'm trying to say here. If you've historically just been an adult reader and you want to give any of these a go, I would highly recommend that you do. YA still exists as one of my go-to genres, one of my favourite genres. I would never see a book and be like, I'm not going to read that because it's YA. If anything, it's one of the things I pick up a lot. And even though my reading tastes, specifically over the past 12 months or so, have lent a little bit more into adult fantasy, I still love the days that I get to sit down with a YA book, maybe devour it in a whole day and like just get into the drama. Have you got a favourite YA book? If you do, I would love to know what it is in the comments below. I'm definitely always on the hunt for like more fantastic young adult books to read. And other than that, that's everything from me today. So I will see you in the next one.